With the world being as divided as it is today, it's important to clarify the objective of this work. In no way is it intended to sway anyone for or against Donald Trump. Like everyone, you've already made up your mind, and that's unlikely to change. Our objective here is to look at the past as a guide to help us determine what's likely to happen in the future during his presidency and beyond in American politics. It's also important to clarify that the two men being compared, both Julius Caesar and Donald Trump, are not the same men and have, at least up until this point, incomparable achievements. What we're diving into here is process, the road to power, and what culminates after the fact. A direct correlation between both men is that they have and will lead the world's superpower of their time. Both are also likely to be credited in delivering the final blow to their dying republics and giving birth to new autocratic states. The turning points for both men occurred in two entirely different theatres of play. Trump's was in all likelihood being the victor in this most recent presidential election. Julius Caesar's took place on a battlefield in a small town in southern Thessaly, Greece, known today as Pharsalus, more than 2,000 years ago. Let's start with a brief history of Julius Caesar and his rise to power. Julius Caesar was born in July 100 BC. He came from a patrician family that found itself on the outside looking in with regards to both political power and familial wealth when compared to the typical aristocrats of his time. Caesar spent his childhood in what amounted to an apartment building in one of the poorer neighborhoods of Rome. Early on, Caesar realized the power in championing for the common man, especially considering his observations of Marian reforms within the legionary ranks and Sulla's seizure of power shortly after. Caesar fled Rome for a period of time when he found himself on one of Sulla's prescription lists and sentenced to death due to his ties with Marius. While away from Rome in 75 BC, he was held hostage by Sicilian pirates, ransomed at a rate of 50 talents, and subsequently came back to capture and crucify the pirates that held him captive, as he promised he would. Caesar found himself caught up in the brutal struggle of Roman politics over the next 15 years of his life. He served in several important roles such as curator, aedile, praetor, and consul. During this time frame, Rome would destroy the Illyrian pirates, put down the slave rebellion in the Third Servile War led by Spartacus and Crixus, and prosecuted bad actors in the Catiline conspiracy. As Caesar found himself rising in political rank within the senatorial class, he became heavily indebted, so much so that he nearly found himself subject to prosecution due to the severity of these debts. It is in the solution to this problem that Caesar found his greatest political achievement, the formation of the First Triumvirate. Pompey came with an impressive military record but lacked political acumen. Crassus was the wealthiest man in Rome, but sought out glory in warfare, which was considered the highest honor in Republican Rome. By finding common ground with both men, Caesar was able to establish a political juggernaut that would go uncontested for the better part of a decade. Caesar took charge of his command in Gaul in 59 BC. Almost immediately upon arrival, he began a campaign of divide and conquer amongst the local tribes. Playing on their hatred for one another, Caesar would form and then break alliances based on his interests at that point in time. Systematically, over the course of 7 hard-fought years, Caesar subjugated one Gallic tribe after another until his genocidal war reached its climatic conclusion at the Battle of Alesia. By 49 BC, the Senate had enough of Julius Caesar. In his 10 years away from Rome, Caesar's fortunes changed from being borderline bankrupt to one of the richest men in the Republic. He was generous with the spoils of war, seeing that his legions were well compensated, along with the state treasury. Crassus, having died in a battle in his invasion of Parthia, and Caesar's daughter, Julia, having died in stillborn childbirth as Pompey's wife, left nothing to keep this political alliance intact. The Senate persuaded Pompey to back them in bringing a number of charges against Caesar. When all negotiations failed and few options left, Caesar crossed the Rubicon and invaded Rome. Caesar, using speed as an unconventional tactic in warfare at that time, convinced Pompey of an impending attack on the city that he could not repel, and therefore ordered all members of the Senate and able-bodied citizens to evacuate. His plan was to gather a large enough fighting force to meet Caesar in battle and defeat him. Pompey and the Senate crossed the Adriatic from the port at Brindisi and landed in Greece as Caesar successfully broke the Republic's naval blockade in pursuit. Pompey avoided battle for the better part of a year, gathering supplies from Greek allies and fielding an army approximately twice the size of Caesar's and about 5 times his heavy cavalry. Having worn down Caesar's men in a battle of attrition throughout the course of 48 BC, Pompey allowed himself to be convinced by the Senate that a victory in battle took precedent over victory by starvation and desertion of Caesar's army. In choosing to do so, Caesar's smaller veteran army was able to decisively defeat Pompey's larger, less experienced one at the Battle of Pharsalus. Utica, Alexandria, Munda, triumphs, tyranny, and eventual assassination were all events to follow that are simply theatre after the fact. Victory at Pharsalus hammered in the final nail of a republic that had been dying for the better part of a century. Victory at Pharsalus opened the door to assign titles such as dictator for life, first citizen, emperor, and even god to mortal men. Victory at Pharsalus killed the Roman Republic and gave birth to the Roman Empire. Donald Trump, born on June 14, 1946 in Queens, New York, is the 4th of 5 children of Fred Trump, a successful real estate developer. He attended the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania, graduating in 1968 with a degree in economics. Trump initially worked for his father's real estate company, the Trump Organization, and later took control, focusing on expanding the business into Manhattan with iconic projects like Trump Tower. Trump gained widespread fame in the 1980s and 1990s, not only for his real estate ventures but also for his ownership of casinos, hotels, and golf courses. He became a public figure through his branding and appearances, particularly as the host of the reality TV show The Apprentice. Over the years, Trump faced both business successes and bankruptcies, but maintained a high public profile. In 2015, Trump announced his candidacy for president as a Republican. His campaign was marked by bold promises, including building a wall on the US-Mexico border, strong stances on immigration, and a populist appeal to working-class Americans. Despite skepticism from political elites, Trump won the Republican nomination and defeated Democratic candidate Hillary Clinton in the 2016 presidential election, ultimately securing the presidency. Donald Trump served as the 45th President of the United States from January 2017 to January 2021. His presidency was marked by significant political and social polarization, with key events including the passage of tax cuts, deregulation efforts, and a controversial approach to immigration, exemplified by the construction of a border wall and the zero-tolerance policy. His administration also withdrew the US from several international agreements, such as the Paris Climate Agreement and the Iran nuclear deal, while renegotiating trade deals like NAFTA, replaced by the USMCA. Trump's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic drew widespread criticism for its slow response, while his rhetoric and actions during the 2020 Black Lives Matter protests and the Capitol riot on January 6, 2021, led to his second impeachment. though he was acquitted by the Senate both times. After losing the 2020 election to Joe Biden, Trump repeatedly made unsubstantiated claims of election fraud, fueling division and mistrust in the electoral system. In 2024, Trump ran for president again as the Republican nominee, despite facing multiple legal challenges related to his actions during and after his presidency. His campaign focused on populist, America First themes, promising to restore the country's former strength and opposing Biden's policies. Trump secured the Republican nomination once again and, in the November 2024 election, won back the presidency, defeating Kamala Harris. It goes without saying that both of these men came to power under completely different circumstances. Caesar leaned on his ancient familial name, political cunning and success in warfare to achieve his political ambitions. Trump entered office as president in 2016 without any family or personal history in politics and without a military background. Caesar dealt with money problems most of his life, where Trump was born into wealth. In truth, there are few parallels to discuss when comparing these two men from their upbringing to achieving political power. Where things start to align and comparisons drawn is once power had actually been attained and how both men were able to triumph over the opposition. So how are they alike? Both boasted populist rhetoric and turned their backs on the elite. Caesar put through initiatives benefiting the common freed Roman. Poor Romans now had opportunities in newly conquered lands they were able to migrate to. He also reduced the overall slave count in Rome, creating jobs otherwise taken by free labor. Trump's tariffs, both implied and real, border walls and threats towards corporations misaligned with his vision of America First, are all designed, at least in theory, to protect the working class. Both were not given a way out from their controversies. While in Gaul, Caesar was told to disband his legions and face trial on a number of charges including bribery, sacrilegious conduct, and waging war without authorization from the Senate. Politicians of the day were likely to be involved in some form of corruption or inappropriate behavior, but no one flaunted their actions the way Caesar did, and the Senate hated him for it. Trump came into office calling out then President Obama's policies, Clinton's emails, and a Democratic Party that had gone too far in partisan politics. His own controversies stemming from several bankruptcies and limiting tax exposure with his businesses to promiscuous relationships had him boasting about being smart and able to do so. The opposition for both Caesar and Trump went to extreme levels in attempting to prevent them from having any further success. Both triumphed over their political adversaries in all-or-nothing contests. Depending on the historian's viewpoint, the penalty Caesar faced if he had surrendered himself to the Senate ranged from banishment to execution. In the subsequent 4 years after Trump left office in his first term, he faced multiple civil and criminal lawsuits which put his potential penalties ranging from becoming financially dissolvent to spending time in federal prison. When Caesar's legions won at Pharsalus just as Trump won in the 2024 presidential election, opposing political mandates collapsed. Both will be credited with the dissolution of their republics. Rome's transition from republic to empire was gradual. In defeating Carthage in the Punic Wars along with conquests in Greece, the population of slaves in Italy increased significantly. The spoils of war disproportionately went to the rich. With an influx of free labor handling the gross domestic product of farming and livestock, Rome's poorer citizens' life choices dwindled. Joining the army or living on the free grain allotment were the most popular. Small, independent Roman farms all but ceased to exist. Traditional values and institutions that Roman citizens in both classes held sacred were secondary to the self-interest of class warfare. Trump comes into office in his second term with the United States as divided as ever. The eroding purchasing power of the dollar has the elite flocking to bidding up prices of assets even further. America's working class feel they're being left behind because the quality of their lives is not transferable to the balance sheet of 7 tech companies' stock performances. Trump is surrounding himself with people who will embrace controversy as they attempt to change the status quo. Can the US pay back a national debt spiraling towards $37 trillion? Can the middle class find second wind prior to becoming an extinct class structure? Can the US dollar maintain reserve status worldwide while accomplishing both? Trump voters tend to think so, but lessons from history cast a different opinion. The 2025 presidential election serves as Trump's Pharsalus because he overwhelmingly defeated his political opposition and survived an assassination attempt in the process. Like Caesar, he now has the mandate to take extraordinary action. He's likely going to disrupt institutional norms and change the way we live for better or worse. As the United States lives out its final days as a republic, be at ease in knowing to look no further than the history of the Roman Empire to get an idea as to what's soon to follow.